Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to the 8th round of action from Tata Steel in Vikonsee in the Netherlands. I apologize for uploading this recap a little bit later than the games concluded. Maybe some of you stayed up late. I know some folks like to wait for the recaps of the games. It was just kind of out all day. So I hope you all had a good rest of your weekend, Sunday. And it's time for some chess. As always, you know the drill of these recaps. On the challenger side, there were some decisive games, but I'm sort of getting a little tired of just including the same winners. Arjun Edigaisi is destroying that section. He has 7 points out of 8. He will be playing a co-leader, not a co-leader, a gentleman tied for second place quite soon. So that will be an interesting matchup. But I'm going to show you 4 games from the Masters section today. Our first game is between Vidit Gujarati, who's chasing, he's very close to first place. He's half a point out versus Nils Grandelius, who's looking to get a win. D4, knight f6. What are we going to get? We're going to get knight f3. Okay, knight f3 is an interesting move. I guess you're trying to see what black is going to do. Is black going to go for a queen's gambit declined? Is, c4, whatever, queen's gambit accepted, just basically play for e6, d5? No. Vidit anticipates that Nils will be playing for g6 and bishop g7, probably the king's Indian defense. And Vidit comes to the board prepared with knight bd2. Now, knight bd2 is not a move that you play often. It's quite simple for black to equalize if they know this is coming. But for a one-time weapon against the gentleman who is most likely going to begin the game like this, it makes a lot of sense. The point of this is very clear. You block in your bishop, but you try to play for e4. So if black plays bishop g7, you are now in a king's pawn game. Because generally, if you play a queen's pawn game, you're going to play d4, c4, and then you're going to play a king's Indian, right? You can play knight c3, but then black is going to play d5. Against knight d2, black can also play d5, but then white has the added advantage of basically playing c4. Now we are kind of in a Grunfeld, sort of. So bishop g7, e4, and now most normal people here play the move d6. I also think you can actually play d5 even now, but then obviously I get this, which is sort of unpleasant. But obviously after e4, d6, we just have a Peer's defense is really what this is. But Nils plays this move. And normally if you allow the move e5, it's not very good. Like the pawn will just go there and attack your knight, and your knight has to move. Of course, white can just continue to develop and not overextend, but Vidit's like, no, Vidit comes prepared to the board with the move e5. Now, if the knight tries to trot through the middle of the board, it will probably be attacked again. And then if it tries to go back to b6, I don't know, I guess white is just comfortably better here. I even wonder if white can just like play h4, h5. Computers seems to really like just playing c5 though. Computers like just take as much space as possible, and I mean white just has a huge center. And you're not overextended here because black has to deal with this knight. So even a move like this, you can like just get a huge attack, bishop g5, etc. And actually Nils goes knight h5. Now believe it or not, the position's still equal. It's still equal. It just looks really absurd, which is, like I said, we're going to have wild openings. G4. I mean, this does not look like two 2700s are playing this game. Looks like a guess the elo game. It really does. White blocks the knight with the bishop, puts the knights in a weird way, overextends in the center, chases the knight around. Black doesn't put a center pawn in the middle, right? Knight f4. And the point that white is making here is that this knight is just a target. So you're kicking it around. And if you go knight e6, I play d5. I'm just completely winning here because your knight is trapped. If you play like knight d5, we have the same problem. So black tries to strike back. So if you take this, I take this. Black is actually okay in this position. In fact, black might even be better. So instead of that, we have knight g3. The knight now goes back to e6 and d5 is impossible. I swear to you, this all happens. Now this next move happens too, which is just completely nuts. And all these moves have occurred before. The move knight f5. This is some sort of theory. According to the database, this has happened before. The point is that white just sacks the knight because black has already committed to the king to castling, right? So the king is just kind of a target on this open file, and this knight is trapped. So this is actually totally possible to play knight f5. And the other purpose of knight f5 is you want the bishop. So you just want to get the two bishops. So Nils attacks the center. We get the bishops, and now Vidit plays h3. Very calm move, making sure this bishop will never get out. This knight is also a little paralyzed, and pawn takes pawn. Now we have a novelty, improving on the previous game, which white took back on d4, I believe, with the knight. Vidit plays the top stockfish move, which is preemptively moving this bishop all the way to h6. It is absolutely stupid. I will yell that word, and I hope my neighbors hear it. I yell it so loud. It is stupid that they have prep in this. How do you have prep up to move 12 in the most absurd niche line that is absolutely never going to happen? Can somebody please explain? Is this in some new course? What is this? What is this? How does Vidit know that this is the best move? Why does he have this prepped? Anyway, queen a5 check. That's the way Nils is going to try to get some initiative. And Vidit's like, let's trade queens, Bo. Bo. I just removed the R. Bo. Yeah, let's trade queens. And I'm actually going to take, not with my king, I'm going to take with my knight. You know why he took with his knight? Because the knight is going to pressure the center from that side anyway. And by moving out of the way of the f-pawn, when knight c6 arrives, he can do this. And now, even though Vidit is still a pawn down, because he has two bishops, because he has space that makes sense, and because these pawns are just going to die in a moment, right? Castle is going to win these pawns. He has some advantages. Now, Nils here has to actually create very quick counterplay. He has to play for this kind of elementary idea of knight b4, and then bishop d7 and rook c8. He has to be very fast with his counterplay, because he tries to go for counterplay against the center. But the problem is that after the very calm takes and just long castles, he doesn't have knight b4 anymore. He has no threats. I just play a3. And if you leave these pawns isolated, that was the mistake that Nils made. By trading pawns, he left his center pawns completely isolated, and Vidit played castles and knight b3. I told you from the beginning, this is his entire strategy, right? He's trying to go for those pawns. Knight e6, and he still stays patient. Just bishop g2, pressuring the center pawn, right? Knight goes back to c7. He still stays patient. He doesn't take the weakness. He doesn't cash out yet, because he can. He absolutely can. But bishop d7, the rook is going to get active maybe on e2. And if white wins material but trades the light squared bishop, opposite colored bishops stay on the board, dark versus light, the winning chances aren't necessarily so good. So Vidit plays f5, which is an amazing move. The point is, after g takes f5, he doesn't even take back. He plays this. For a moment, he's down 2 pawns. But look at this. Look what he does to the black pawn structure and the H pawn, right? Total loner. It was apparently even stronger to play g5. Stockfish was kind of saying the same idea, to just leave black with a completely damaged structure, and then bishop f4 will remove the guard of this, then you will win this, and you will attack on the g file. So once the bishops get out of the way, it would have been even stronger to play for g5. But okay, he does this, he takes the pawn back, now he's only 1 pawn down, and his whole position is just tied together extremely well. We have knight moving to e5, trying to create some center counterplay, and on move 24, black finally moved his bishop. Now let's see if black is going to be able to move his rook. Okay, b3 was played to prevent knight c4, by the way. That's why white did that. Also just good to have back rank escape. a4, very useful move, taking queenside space, just improving the position, letting black self-destruct. Black plays a6. Okay, black doesn't self-destruct. Now we come back with the bishop. All right, now we play rook ff2. What is the plan here for Vidit? How's Vidit going to win this? Okay, you see what Vidit's doing? Boop, boop, boop. Just improving moves. Just improving moves, not doing anything crazy. And then here Vidit comes up with his winning idea. Look at this. King a3. He's like, hi, my name is Vidit, and I'm going to walk my king into b6. How are you going to protect against this? Okay, the knight backs up. Now we have c4. Whoa. So we have so much pressure on the enemy that if you just take, I go here. That's why I also move my king out of the way. So this move was not a check. Rook takes d2, for example. There is check. F takes e5. Rook takes d2. Pawn takes bishop. And kaboom at the end. And you lose your rook. So oftentimes when you have overwhelming positional pressure, you end it with a tactic. And that's why he moved his king out of the way. To come in closer like this, right? But also get out of the way of the check. So we have knight e8, c4. And now he kind of begins the chopping down process. He chops down the bishop. He chops down the pawn. He chops down the next pawn. Because rook takes d2 is obviously protected. So d takes c6. And Nils Grandelius resigned. Very successful opening experiment. Not even an experiment. I'm not sure you can call it an experiment. That opening was some sort of wild niche thesis statement by Vidit, who now bounces back from defeat yesterday against Jordan van Forest. And he is half a point out of first place. The next game that I would like to show you is the game between Shahryar Mamedyarov and Pragg. So Shahryar with a win will be in first place. He's also playing very well in this tournament, and he goes for c4. Pragg, obviously, he's won a few games, but he also lost a few games. He's coming off a loss against Magnus. I mean, that's... worse things can happen in life, right? So we have e5, g3. Now, the meta here, the best line against c4, e5, g3, there are many. Knight f... that's not correct. There are not many. There's two. Knight f6 and d5 is considered a very principled main line, but also c6, trying to play d5 straight away. Now, white can allow that, and that play can develop in a lot of different ways there. But Shah chooses to play d4, e4, and now not play bishop g2, d5, but play queen a4. Now, I have seen this move. I actually wanted to play this move in my recent tournament. I chose not to, which is why I was shocked to see it in this game. The whole point of queen a4 is that on d5, you take and the pawn cannot take back. So black will have to do something like this, and this is just much better for white, because now the queen is stuck defending this kind of awkward center pawn. So as absurd as queen a4 is, and it is a little absurd if black plays very well, it just prevents d5. Now, the main line here is still to play d5, by the way. And on pawn takes pawn, black plays here the top engine move, bishop d7. If you don't remember or know that, you will never play that. You will just never play this. The point is that you now threaten to take the pawn, and if white plays something like queen b3, there's takes. And even though both pawns are hanging, this position is very good for black. So for example, let's say if you play that knight c6, so if this, you have this, you can give up a second pawn, and actually black is almost better here. Almost. Black has, white has only one move that doesn't lose, which is bishop to h3. Because the thing is, white just has zero development. So okay, you win two pawns, good for you, but all of black's pieces are out. So bishop h3 is the only move that doesn't just straight up lose on the spot for white. So Pragg doesn't do that though. Pragg doesn't do that. He plays b5. Now, I've never seen the move b5, but Stockfish likes it. I mean, at a low depth, I don't know what home computers they're using. But, you know, you just try to kick the queen out and then play knight f6. So you're still trying to gambit the pawns. You're trying to gambit these pawns because you're not really afraid. And again, black would get a big lead in development. If you're a beginner watching this, you're saying, wait, but they're giving up two pawns in the opening. I can do that too? Well, I mean, whether you want to or not, you're probably going to. But no, don't play like this. Don't give up two pawns in the opening. Because there's... If you're a beginner or even a strong beginner, low intermediate, you have no understanding of like, okay, I'm down two pawns, but I have an initiative. You know, next move, you're going to play like a random knight move and blunder your knight. So we don't get that though. We get knight f6, bishop g5, and a very unique position already early on as Pragg plays queen a5 check. This is brand new territory. This has never happened before. So knight c3, inviting the move pawn to b4, but that blocks the queen, obviously. And now the knight comes back and hangs out with the king here. Pragg plays knight takes d5. He finally takes back the knight. And bishop h3. We just saw this bishop h3. I think I mentioned that. That was the only move in that position that didn't immediately lose for white. Bishop h3 is a fascinating move. The point of bishop h3 is like, let's just say you play bishop g2. Right? You just attack this. So black here will play either f5 and just lock in this pawn, or bishop e6. And that bishop is really annoying, because if you play queen c2, I play b3 check, and you lose. You actually just straight up lose the game. Because here, bishop or knight to b4, and then either knight c2 or just bishop b4 completely laser. I mean, it's just game over. So you actually have to play this move to trade off black's light squared bishop. You almost never bring the bishop that far out when you fianchetto it, right? So we have knight to d7, we have rook c1, and the bishop drops back to d2. And now, what Shah is going to do here is he's going to use black's awkward pawn positioning against him. That's all you need at the 2700 level. You need the fact that you've only put one pawn in the center, but the opponent's kind of got like scattered pawns. They don't tie together very well. So what does he do? Begins f3. Now, if you take on f3, there might even be the option to not take this back. You can maybe play e4. That's not en passant because you're not standing next to the pawn. Sometimes that's easy to forget. f2 check, you take it, and if the knight goes back to f6, maybe we even castle, dude. I don't know, maybe we castle, but we obviously can't just play queen f3. Queen a2, we castle, we have e5, huge initiative, and white is much, much better. So he plays f3, Pragg decides not to take, he tries to just hold the center together, but now this absurd knight on h3 is back on f2, and it's pressuring the center. We have ef3. Folks, what move did I just tell you? Were you paying attention? e4. Right? Here the computer gives one of the dumbest moves ever, although it does make actual sense. Queen b5, just leaving this to die because it's mate. It's just a very funny move. Queen f3 though. But the computer thinks that going back to c7 is better here than going back to b6. I don't know why you would ever in your right mind go to c7, maybe because going to e6 in the future. But that doesn't even pop up in the engine lines. Computer just likes the knight here. I don't know. Instead, he goes to b6 like any normal human. Castles, bishop e7. Now here comes the knight. Shak is completely content just letting this pawn just hang out, you know, with his pieces. You know what the eval of this position is, by the way? +3. Huh? But Pragg is up a pawn. And he's got all his pieces. What is the big deal? Here's the big deal. The big deal in this position is that you can actually trade queens. You could even trade queens. And they do. They do trade queens right now. White is much better here because white has the center and actually a pass pawn. No pawns in the way. So pass pawn. And once you win the pawn back, which you will in a moment, don't worry. You're going to win one of the pawns back. You're going to win one of these pawns. As he plays knight f5. Look at flashy move. Hits the knight. Takes the bishop. Takes the pawn back. So now he's not even down a pawn. He's got a beautiful bishop and his knight is going to travel into this territory. So Pragg is going to have to defend. And this is perhaps the most absurd move of this game. He trades the bishop into the knight. Like, you got to be so sure that is the right thing to do. I mean, that is a brave man. Let me tell you something. I would not make that trade. Takes, knight e4. So now we're going to d6, right? g5, h3, preventing the pawn from coming to g4. f6, trying to break out. And here comes rook c5. The next and final layer of initiative occurs. Black tries to create a little bit of counterplay. That pawn has just stood there the whole game. Like, what is going on here, right? So now we have knight takes f3, and Shak is going to begin the cleanup and consolidation process. He fixes that structure. He rotates the knight. He gives up b2 because f5 is hanging, and then h6 is hanging, and then g4 is hanging. And even though Pragg has a couple of pawns on his own, this is not going to work. So, you know, you can play. It looks like you're actually going to get there, but you're not. You're just not. b2, king c2. There's nothing. So, yeah, knight c3. King walks over, and Pragg resigned. Resigned because even if you get a pawn, I go here, your king can't stop all the pawns. Your knight can't stop all the pawns. So, the game is over. Very interesting opening idea used by Shak. What I imagine if Pragg knew everything is he would have played d5, bishop d7, and maybe Shak would have come up with some interesting idea even here. Maybe d6, which was seen in the game Peter Svidler and Giri in one of those online things. I don't think d6 is the best move, though. Maybe bishop h3. Would have been interesting, but we don't get it. Pragg plays in a kind of interesting and exciting way, but yeah, I mean, Shak comes in with yet another win, and now he's tied for first. We've got the third game I'd like to show you. Speaking of the gentleman himself, Anish Giri, we're going to take a look at this game between Esipenko and, well, the guy whose name I just said. This one was an Italian, bishop c4, gioco pianissimo with d3, c3, and an interesting one where black doesn't play solid. Black attacks the center right away. Now, personally, I would always recommend playing like this for beginners, even intermediate and advanced folks, everybody, because the lines are so active and open. This kind of structure is like slow maneuvering, controlling certain squares and negating the opponent's initiative in hopes that they overextend. Nobody even knows what that means, okay? Like that, like literally just buzzwords. Chess is all about attack, so just attack and have fun. And I like these lines because you get a lot of open lines. I like these lines, like these variations, because you get a lot of open lines. So, rook e1, bishop to g4, and black plays knight back to b6. Now, everything that you are seeing here, including this move bishop b3, hanging a complete pawn, has been seen before in many top-level games. In fact, Anish Giri has played this with the white pieces himself against none other than Hikaru Nakamura. So white plays knight takes e5. We now have two hanging queens, right? But queen goes back to f5, and white plays knight e to f3. Now, on a low depth, the ancient thinks that black is almost winning here, which is really funny. That's not the case. But we have rook fe8, rook ae8 is also possible. Black definitely has a lot more activity, though. A lot more activity. So this line is it's bold to go for this line with white. So in this position, after rook fe8, Esipenko played g4. Now g4 is just a clean fork. You are not seeing that incorrectly. However, after it takes, and check, the king goes to h1, black has a raging initiative. All right, so he's got like a queen, bishop, knight. Maybe the rook will come join the party. This knight's a little bit, slow, but never say never. That rook is going to come. Very dangerous position. Now, knight h2, they are still following the top line of the engine. Clearly, both guys well prepared. Queen goes back to g6, bishop to c2, and now that knight, you screw it into d3. You look at your opponent, and you're like, good night, good sir. And then they look at you like, that was the worst pun ever. You should go jump off a bridge. But like not a very tall one. I don't want to hurt you. Maybe roll an ankle or something. So knight d3. And the point is, you're threatening knight f2. You're threatening rook e1, right? So white decides to trade off. Okay, not surprising. And now we kind of see the whole point of this line. Like, white just has no development. So black is doing his thing. Very active. Do you trade queens when you're down material? Absolutely, as long as it means you can get another pawn. Okay. So one guy has an extra horse. The other guy has 3 extra pawns. Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to Gotham Chess Recaps. No, your video didn't loop. I'm just saying, I mean, who's going to win? It's the 3 pawns versus the horse. You know, the battle of the 3 pawns versus the horse. I don't know what the hell is going to happen here. You would think that the piece is better. Computer prefers the piece, but very curious to see. So, rook d2, and Anish actually gets the bishops off the board as well. Anish seems to think that the 2 rooks and the knight and the 6 pawns are better than the 2 rooks, the 2 knights, and 3 pawns. So I'm willing to bet that this game is going to be decided on this side of the board, because that is where the imbalance is. So that means that those pawns are either going to win, or these rooks are either going to, like, take all the pawns. So let's see what happens. So knight d4. All right, fine. There's a little bit of strong knight. There we go. The battle is beginning. The knight goes back to defend everything, and now we have another... Wow. So Anish thinks that even with this trade, the 2 rooks and the 6 pawns will beat the 2 rooks and the 3 and the knight. Okay. Okay, f6, king g2. We're bringing the kings like we should in endgames. Oh, Esipenko's threatening to infiltrate. Holy crap. He's just giving this away to get rook e2 and take every other pawn, right? So Esipenko doesn't like that. Now here comes g5. Uh-oh. Check. Trade rooks with me, bro. Rook and 3 is going to beat rook and knight. Esipenko's like, I'm not convinced I want to trade the rooks. Draw? Oh, now I'm bringing my other rook. No draw. You want to trade rooks? Esipenko's like, damn. I think if I trade rooks, these pawns are just way too strong. So I'm not going to trade rooks. Anisha's like, well, my game plan's relatively simple, dude. I just got to play g4. I just got to push my pawns. Now, here, knight f1 is the best move. I guess to... Well, I don't know. I mean, h4 is very scary. And then I guess you just stop the pawns from the other side. That's what Stockfish gives. I'm just glad I just have to observe this game. I don't actually have to play it. The rook goes to around first, but because the rook goes around first and you didn't actually have h4, black plays king g6. Uh-oh. In this day and age, clearing your throat 3 times in one recap. Hopefully it's nothing serious. Rook g8, rook g7, rook f8, and Anisha's like, I don't know, man. I got pawns. I should probably just focus on that side of the board. Isn't it incredible that no one's touched this side of the board like at all? Those pawns are like, hey, what about us? And they're like, I don't know. It doesn't matter because we can't break through one another over there. So knight back to f1, h4, a4, a5. Oh, fantastic. Somebody actually finally moved us. b4. Oh, my God. The excitement on that side of the board is not over. b6. Takes. I'm going after that pawn. And he's just like, no, you're not. Like, who do you think you are? Running around leaving scars, collecting your jar of hearts. You did not think I was going to quote that song. Who sings it? I don't know. Tell me in the comments. Jar of hearts, right? Knight d2. Pawns keep rolling. Check. And here Anish plays a very savage move. King f4. It's like you have a gun pointed at you, but you are pointing one right back. Sorry. Guns. American kind of thing, you know? If I was not an American creator, I would not make such a reference. No, but it's yeah, that's definitely a hot subject. Rook f1. You can check my king by moving your knight, but then I obviously just play pawn takes rook. But then I gotta go out of the way. Anish is like, oh, you're threatening a discover check. That's adorable. Check right back to you. Takes G2. There are two problems here for white. Number one, your rook is hanging. Number two, you're about to get ladder mated. Which one is worse? Esipenko plays rook f2. And now the king's like, what's up? King e3. That is a gross move. If you play rook takes g2 in this position, you know what I'm going to play? I'm going to take your knight. You can win this, and then I mate you. And if you don't take my rook, I'm still going to mate you. I don't care. Yeah. Yeah. Nasty. Anish Giri, I am willing to bet. I don't know. If Anish Giri came up with all of this over the board, the fact that he actually could go for... No, this obviously I'm sure is his prep, but the fact that he can actually trade so many pieces and that endgame of 3 against 0 is so easy to win, that is very impressive. I feel as though Anish prepared and also studied which trades of that position were advantageous, but I don't know. I have no idea, but a very impressive game from Anish, who is now half a point out of first place on a 3-game winning streak. And time for the final game, ladies and gentlemen. Time for the final game. The whole point of the thumbnail. Listen, we got to put Magnus on thumbnails and whatnot. I would love to shine a light, and I do shine a light when I analyze the games on the other grandmasters of this tournament. But let me tell you something. On YouTube, it's all about discoverability. That's the one major advantage of a platform where you just have your videos as opposed to a live streaming platform. Discoverability. Person goes on browsing videos, they get recommended stuff, right? That's what YouTube is. Magnus Carlsen on thumbnails and in titles, just a smart business move. You know, I could shout out one of the players in the challenger section. Absolutely. That video is never going to get recommended. It's one of the reasons, actually, that some of the more fun content and big names get more views, because it just gets pushed out more. So don't hate the player, hate the game. I always throw Magnus in here until he's not world champion anymore and until he's at a GOAT status. Now, he is playing American Sam Shankland, who is a theoretical genius. He's very well prepared. He's on -1 in the tournament, so he's looking to get his first win. -1 means he's lost the game and he hasn't won one yet, so one more loss than a win. And we begin with a relatively standard Queen's Gambit declined until Magnus Carlsen plays c5. Now, c5 on its own is not crazy. That's the Tarrasch defense. So now we're going to get pawn takes. And there's lines here, knight f6, etc., where black kind of assaults the center. Dubov inspired, by the way. Dubov plays this a lot, and Magnus obviously works with Dubov. But Magnus Carlsen shocked the whole damn world by taking the mirror image pawn on d4. Now, the reason inherently why this is bad is because I can just go here, and if you just take my pawn, I'm just a pawn up. Well, I'm just a pawn up. So black is losing. However, that's not the end of the story, because cd5, cd4 isn't just lost for black. Otherwise, Magnus wouldn't have played it. This is a gambit. It's called the Skara Gambit. There's a streamer by the name of Skara, but this one has an H in it. It would be a lot cooler if it was called the Von Skara Gambit. I don't know why. Just vaguely German. It just sounds like a villain. And yeah, black basically sacks a pawn for virtually nothing. Activity. You should say this. Activity. That's what black gets. So here the meta is actually not to take back, because black has this move. And you can't take because of this. By the way, maybe video on the Skara? Magnus Carlsen's new opening? Maybe. Point is this. I'm going to get active development. And then I'm going to be up a pawn, but knight c2 is mate. So it's a little bit unpleasant for white. So that's why white plays queen a4 check in this position, to put something on d7 before taking on d4. Right, so bishop d7, queen d4. Very intelligent decision. So pawn takes d5, queen d5, and now black doesn't protect b7 at all, but plays the move knight f6. Where did we see similar stuff? Were you paying attention? You saw it's in this video. You got no excuse. You can forget stuff in my old videos, even the one from yesterday. Well, we just saw this. The point is queen b7, knight c6, and actually you're completely fine. Maybe even bishop c6, maybe knight c6, some knight b5, but probably not, just bishop b4. Yeah, I mean, even bishop c6 might be okay, but I think it's knight c6, and black just has a lead in development. Big one. So instead of that, white goes back to b3. Now, black does not defend this pawn, but also doesn't make a move in a traditional way. Black plays knight a6. Point of knight a6 is knight b4. Like from that square, but knight c5 is the critical idea, which you cannot accomplish if you're right here. Now, what does white want? According to Stockfish, and I've ran this Gambit on Stockfish on Leela, it's better for white. Like, it is better for white, but white has to play very energetically. So white has to play, white has to be solid at first and castle, but then white has to kind of get moving. And black's major advantage here is that they don't have an e-pawn, so they can play like rook c8, knight c5, like they can just get all their pieces out super fast. So what does Shanklin do? He develops his knight. He obviously doesn't hang his queen, and now Magnus just brings the rook to c8. So e3, g3, bishop g2 is another way of playing. Knight e5, going for the bishop pair. e3 played. Knight e4. So Magnus, I mean, it's quite clear, right? Knight to e4. Really not an engine favored move. Bishop d6 and just developing is what the engine likes. And if white plays bishop e2, like bishop d2, some like uber solid, you know, white just should get all their pieces out and then just say, I'm up a pawn, so I'm happy. But Magnus goes for this. Now, bishop d3 is the best move. Come and take me, okay? So takes, obviously, and now black plays knight d5, looking to get to this pawn. Very annoying position. If white plays bishop d2, kabam. You have to trade. That's pretty unpleasant, right? So, wow. Yeah, my throat's not feeling great, but I really doubt that it's the scary thing. I also feel like my mouth is just really dry. I've been needing to drink water this entire recap. I don't really know why I haven't. Should take better care of myself. Ah, wonderful. Okay, castles. Shanklin here is like, yo, just take my pawn. Because when you do, I'm going to get open lines, and you're still stuck not developing. Now, you can't play knight b4. You still can play knight b4. However, I think Shanklin thinks that the more pieces he trades and is able to kind of consolidate in the middle, the more it's going to be like, oh, well, I'm up a pawn, and you're going to feel it now, right? You're going to feel my extra pawn. Well, that phrasing could have been slightly better. But Magnus takes on c3. Magnus actually takes the bait. And after bishop b2, yeah, it's like, look at this. Right? You can kind of see what's going on here. If black plays knight d5, white can play queen b3. The evaluation here is +4. That's how quickly the position can be lost, because black just never gets out. Black just never moves the bishop. You can only defend so much. e4, knight e5, I mean, bishop c4, rook d1. I overrun you before you can get settled. So we sometimes take for granted how close the position is, right? How close, not closed, close. Bishop b4. Okay, this is the moment in this game that Sam Shanklin can maybe take over the initiative, right? So something like knight e5. Like never, he can take over the initiative and never let it go, is what I was trying to say. Knight e5. For example, bishop goes to e6. He can even play f4. Because again, there's no threats. There's no threats here. Knight moves, he just moves his queen, maybe even gives a check when the knight moves. And if Magnus castles, he's hanging a pawn with check, which is probably just not a good thing. The bishop can come back, or you can just go checkmate the guy. Not right away, you don't want to lose this, but maybe bishop f5, rook f3, rook h3, something like this. So knight e5 is a very legit move. Maybe the best move is bishop to a4, and now you go queen d2, line of sight right here. Knight can take, but that is very scary to tie all your pieces together. Queen d5 is a strong move here. So is rook c5, I think. Rook c5 is also a good move. And now the only way to continue the advantage here for white, the initiative, is to play rook f c1. So to hang your knight, but pressure your opponent's knight so that the rook can't do both things at the same time. And this is the way Shanklin could have played for an advantage. He could have gone for knight e5, went for an f4, or kind of one of these queen d2, rook f c1. It's a little bit tricky, though. You're always a little worried. You're going to blunder something, and then you can't lose to the Skara Gambit, okay? All right, you're not going to get another Tata Steel invite. So Shanklin's got the situation in hand. Does he play knight e5? Does he even take on h7? That's just an absurd move. Please don't play that move. Not even that bad, though. Queen b3, pressuring and trying to put a rook on c1. But Sam says bishop takes knight. So he gets rid of the knight first, and he slides his rook over to b1 to pressure the queen side. Magnus brings the bishop back to f6, hitting the queen. The queen moves out of the way. Rook c7 defense, and e4. So a zero-risk approach from Sam. There are now no weaknesses, no tricks in the position. Castles, he plays e5 to push the bishop a little bit back. He could play queen e4 here, threatening mate, although after this, that just does nothing. So he puts his knight on d4, and he forces some stuff here. He plays the move e6. Now we're going to get some trades. So we have takes. And, yeah, I mean, it was check, so the bishop couldn't be taken. Sam moves the queen to safety. We have rooks, bishops, queens, and 4 pawns. But the truth is, folks, with the opposite colored bishops in this position, black cannot do anything here. And we're talking about black not doing anything because black kind of was the instigator. He played a weird opening, and Sam just kind of played very solidly. And right here, he invited Magnus to bring his rook in. Magnus can, of course, play like some moves back there, but this move forces an exchange. So Sam was sort of offering that up to Magnus. They swap a couple of pieces, and bishop c2, the players agree to a draw because of this. Now, I have told you, we will cover Magnus games, win, lose, or draw. And even though this was not the most exciting game, it was up to Sam. Sam had to, you know, take the initiative, and Magnus gave him some opportunities. He took some risk with this whole, first of all, with this whole opening. Knight c3, and listen, you gotta go for 95. Like, if it's a must-win game, you play 95. That's what you play. But Sam, you know, played it a bit safe. Who might have say he played not the best way, but he chose an approach where there was 0% chance of losing. Can't really fault the guy. He didn't lose. He, you know, played solid, made Magnus be precise, and then they liquidated. So, what can I say? Would have been a little bit more fun of a recap. Well, no, there was a great recap. Let's be honest. You're 36 minutes into it. You're loving it. But it would have been a little bit more fun of a game maybe if we got this 95. But okay. Draw agreed. And that sets up a rest day tomorrow. But after 8 rounds, it is a two-way tie for first between Magnus Carlsen and Shahryar Mamedyarov, who play each other after the rest day on the 25th of January. And Anish Giri and Vidit Gujarati with 5 out of 8, tied for 3rd and 4th. But really, they are in 2nd place. And that is all. Hope you enjoyed the recap. Hope you had a good weekend. And I will see you, not tomorrow, but the day after, for 9th round of Tata Steel 2022. Get out of here.